$1,200,000. That is the reward on the table right now for anyone who can say where Nancy Guthrie is. Anyone who can give investigators a name. Anyone who knows something, anything, and is willing to say it out loud. $1.2 million. And not a single person has claimed it. In a country where people sell out their closest friends for far less, that silence is not nothing. That silence is a statement. It tells you something specific about the kind of person who did this and the kind of world he moves through. Because either the people around him are too loyal to talk or too afraid, or, and this is the possibility that investigators cannot shake, nobody around him even knows what he did. He has folded himself so seamlessly back into ordinary life that the people closest to him have no reason to suspect a thing. 67 days. 13,000 tips reviewed by the FBI. Surveillance footage that went around the world. And no arrest. No named suspect. No answer. Something is wrong with this picture. And today we are going to show you exactly what it is. She was home by 9:50 in the evening. The garage door closed. The lights went off. Everything looked exactly the way it should. By 2:30 in the morning, she was gone. That is a 4-hour window. 4 hours in a quiet, residential neighborhood in Tucson, Arizona. The kind of neighborhood with cameras on doorways and residents who notice unfamiliar cars. For hours where something was done to an 84-year-old woman inside her own home, and not a single neighbor heard anything worth reporting. 4 hours is a long time. Long enough to suggest that whoever was inside that house was not in a rush, was not panicking, was operating with a level of patience and composure that, when you sit with it, is more disturbing than the act itself. This was not desperate. This was not impulsive. This was planned, carefully, calmly, by someone who had thought through every detail, including how long they had before morning came. The question is not whether this person knew what they were doing. The evidence has already answered that. The question is how someone this deliberate, this careful, this present in that community, has gone completely unidentified for more than 2 months. That is what we are here to examine today. Notice how he moves. There is no rushing, no checking over his shoulder, no sign of someone who is afraid of being seen. He walks up to that door the way you walk to your own front door at the end of a long day, unhurried, unbothered, completely at ease. Former FBI agents watching that footage used the same word independently of each other. Bravado. He moves with the quiet confidence of someone who is certain he will not be caught. And for 67 days, he has been right. 13,000 tips. A $1.2 million reward. The full weight of the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department. And the man in that footage is still unidentified. Still unnamed. Still, according to investigators, likely still present in the same world he has always moved through. That walk is the most important piece of evidence in this case. Not because of what it tells us about the crime, but because of what it tells us about who committed it. Today we are going to follow that walk to where it leads. Saturday, January 31st, 2026. Nancy Guthrie spends the evening the way she has spent dozens of evenings before, at her daughter Annie's house for dinner and a game night. She arrives by Uber around 5:30 in the afternoon. The evening is warm. The family is together. It is, by every account, a completely ordinary night. Annie's husband drives Nancy home when the evening winds down. The garage door of her Catalina Foothills home opens at 9:48 p.m. and closes 2 minutes later. She is inside. She is safe. Everyone who loves her goes to sleep believing that. At some point in the hours that follow, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker, a device that syncs continuously to her phone over her home Wi-Fi, stops transmitting. The connection does not fade. It drops. Which means she was moved, suddenly, beyond the reach of her own network. Investigators would later confirm this happened at approximately 2:30 in the morning. Nobody heard anything. Nobody called 911. The neighborhood gave nothing away. The following morning, Nancy does not appear for her regular virtual church service with friends, a routine she kept without fail. When calls go unanswered, family members go to the house. What they find when they arrive ends any hope that there is a simple explanation for her absence. There is blood on the front porch. It is later confirmed by DNA analysis to be Nancy's. The Pima County Sheriff's Department is called. Within hours, the conclusion that investigators reach is unambiguous. Nancy Guthrie did not leave on her own. She was taken from her home against her will. This is a kidnapping. What follows over the next 67 days, the investigation, the evidence, the ransom notes, the silence, is a case that has confounded some of the most experienced law enforcement professionals in the country. And it begins here on a quiet street in Tucson in the middle of the night when no one was watching. What happens in the first hours of a criminal investigation determines, in many cases, whether it is ever solved. Evidence degrades. Witnesses forget. Suspects move. The window in which a case can be broken open is narrow, and it closes fast. In the Nancy Guthrie case, that window may have closed before anyone realized it was open. According to sources with direct knowledge of the investigation, sources who spoke to journalists covering the case, the initial response at the scene was shaped by an assumption that Nancy Guthrie had wandered off, that an 84-year-old woman had become confused in the night and left her home on her own. The blood on the porch was there. The circumstances were there. And the investigation, in its earliest hours, was still being run as a search and rescue operation rather than a criminal one. Sources described it as a rush to judgment, one that locked the response into the wrong framework at the worst possible moment. By the time the framing shifted, time had passed that cannot be recovered. The FBI was brought in. A 24-hour command post was established. Forensic teams, cadaver dogs, neighborhood canvasses, surveillance footage requests across a wide radius, all of it mobilized. But the golden hours were gone. Sheriff Chris Nanos faced public scrutiny on multiple fronts. Reports emerged that the lead detective assigned to the case had limited experience with investigations of this nature. Nanos defended his department publicly and firmly. But the questions did not go away, and they have shaped how this investigation has been perceived ever since. None of this means the case cannot be solved. But it means the path to solving it became harder than it needed to be, and earlier than it should have. 10 days into the investigation, the FBI announced a development that shifted the entire public understanding of this case. Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera, a Google Nest device, had not been set up with a cloud storage subscription. Under ordinary circumstances, that means any footage captured by the device is gone the moment it is overwritten. No backup, no server, no record. But the FBI reached out to Google's engineering team directly. What engineers found in the residual data of backend servers, data that should, by standard operation, have already been overwritten, changed everything. Fragments of footage. Still images. Enough to see who had been at Nancy Guthrie's front door the morning she disappeared. FBI Director Kash Patel released that footage publicly on February 10, 2026. What that footage shows is a figure covered completely, ski mask, gloves, jacket, long pants. A black, 25-liter backpack on his back. A holstered pistol on his hip, sitting slightly off-center. He approaches the camera. He tries to knock it from the wall. When that does not work, he reaches into a potted plant nearby and uses a piece of foliage to cover the lens. He knew the camera was there before he arrived. He came with a plan for it. And in executing that plan, he handed investigators his build, his height, his gait, and a very specific piece of equipment that became a lead in its own right. The FBI described the suspect as male, approximately 5'9" to 5'10", average build, with a black mustache visible through the mask. The backpack, an Ozark Trail 25-liter hiker pack, was traced to retail outlets across the Tucson area as investigators sought purchase records. The footage generated over 4,000 tips in the 24 hours after its release. Former FBI agents who reviewed it publicly noted something specific about the way the suspect moves. Not what he does, but how he does it. There is no urgency in his approach. No sign of someone operating at the edge of their composure. He moves through the scene with a steadiness that speaks to either extensive preparation or a complete absence of fear. One person watching the footage online wrote simply, "He walks like he has already won." 2 months later, he remains unidentified. The footage has been seen by millions. His face, what can be seen of it, has been studied by professional analysts and amateur investigators alike. And nobody has put a name to him. That fact alone tells you something about who this person is and where he has been hiding since. Beyond the doorbell footage, investigators have spent more than 2 months working through physical evidence that has produced leads without yet producing answers. Blood from the scene was confirmed through DNA analysis to be Nancy Guthrie's. Separately, gloves recovered approximately 1.5 miles from the home appeared to match the pair worn by the figure in the doorbell footage. DNA recovered from those gloves was analyzed and came back connected to a local restaurant worker who the sheriff's department confirmed was not considered part of the investigation. The department noted publicly that other DNA evidence from the scene remained under analysis. Investigators have since stated they are pursuing genetic genealogy, a process that can connect partial or degraded DNA to family lineages and build toward an identification even without a direct database match. That process takes months, and it is ongoing. A gray Range Rover spotted near the home was seized and examined. A search warrant was executed at a residence in Rio Rico, approximately 60 miles south of Tucson, near the U.S.-Mexico border. A person was briefly detained during a traffic stop in that area and subsequently released without charges. None of these developments produced a named suspect. Investigators also confirmed they were reviewing surveillance footage from the days and weeks before the abduction, looking not just at the night itself, but at the period before it. Whether the suspect's presence appears in footage from prior dates, whether the area was being watched in advance, that review is continuing. The family offered a private reward of $1 million for information leading to Nancy's recovery. The FBI separately offers up to $100,000 for information resulting in an arrest and conviction. As of this recording, neither reward has been claimed. In the days following Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, ransom notes began reaching news organizations. Multiple outlets received them, some demanding payment in cryptocurrency, some containing details about the scene that gave investigators pause. The FBI's special agent in charge of the Phoenix field office stated publicly that the Bureau believed at least one of the early notes was likely legitimate. The basis for that assessment: the note contained specific, verifiable details connected to the scene, tied to a payment deadline, in a way that suggested direct knowledge of the crime. References to Nancy's Apple Watch and to a floodlight at the property were among the details mentioned in reporting at the time. 2 deadlines referenced in the notes came and went, one on a Thursday, one the following Monday. The Guthrie family responded publicly, in a video addressed directly to whoever held Nancy, saying they were willing to pay for her return. That video was not the statement of a family performing for cameras. Watch what it does not say, and where the words stop. The people who know Nancy Guthrie best, saying the only thing they have left to say. In the weeks that followed, the notes continued, some almost certainly fraudulent, including one traced back to a man in California who had no connection to the case. Investigators were clear that not every note warranted serious attention. The volume of false information being fed into an active investigation of this profile is, according to experienced agents, a consistent and exhausting obstacle. Then, on April 6, 2026, the same morning Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show for the first time in 2 months. 2 new messages arrived from a sender who had been writing since February. The content of those notes represented the most significant development in the case in weeks. The sender claimed Nancy was no longer alive. They provided a location, the Mexican state of Sonora, approximately 70 miles from Tucson, where they claimed to have seen her. And they offered to provide both the location of her remains and the identities of those responsible in exchange for cryptocurrency. The timing of those notes arriving on the day of Savannah's return was not lost on investigators or analysts following the case. A former FBI special agent commenting publicly said the timing was unlikely to be accidental, that it was a deliberate act against the family on one of their most visible days. The FBI has not confirmed the authenticity of any ransom communication in this case. No payment from any of the rewards has been confirmed. The notes remain part of an active investigation. Here is the central question of the Nancy Guthrie case, and the one that investigators have not been able to answer in 67 days. We're living in 2026. Cell tower data can place a phone within meters of a location. License plate readers log vehicles at intersections across entire cities. Doorbell cameras, dash cams, and retail security systems create an overlapping web of footage that is nearly impossible to move through without being captured somewhere. And yet the man in that doorbell footage, whose face, build, gait, and equipment have been studied by millions of people, has no name. Sheriff Nanos has stated publicly that he believes this was a targeted abduction. Nancy Guthrie was not a random victim. Her home was known. Her routine was understood. The attack was executed with a level of planning that points to someone who had spent time in her world, observed it, mapped it, and chosen a moment with care. The sheriff has also hinted publicly at a motive that goes beyond what has been reported, something beyond the obvious connection to Savannah Guthrie's public profile. He has not elaborated, but the implication is that investigators may understand more about why Nancy was targeted than they have shared publicly. Savannah Guthrie has spoken about this. She expressed the belief that her mother may have been targeted because of her, that her profile as a national news anchor made her family vulnerable. She described the thought as something she could barely sit with. But sit with what the sheriff said alongside what that footage shows. A suspect who moves without fear, who prepared for the camera, who left no usable trace, who has not been surfaced by 13,000 tips, a seven-figure reward, or months of sustained federal attention. That is not someone operating from the outside. That is someone who belongs, or who has made himself belong, in the environment he moves through. Someone whose presence in that community reads as completely ordinary to the people around him. One person watching the footage online wrote that what unsettled them most was not the mask or the weapon, it was the pace. The complete absence of urgency. As though the person in that footage had decided, before he ever arrived, that nothing about this night would go wrong for him. 67 days of evidence has not proven him wrong. Not yet. Cases like this do not stay cold forever. Genetic genealogy takes time. Pre-abduction surveillance review takes time. The person who sent those notes to the media, whatever their actual connection to this case, has created a thread. And threads, when pulled carefully by investigators who know what they're doing, have a way of unraveling things. The question is not whether this case breaks. The question is when. As of April 8, 2026, the 67th day since Nancy Guthrie was reported missing, no arrest has been made. No suspect has been named publicly. Her whereabouts and condition remain officially unknown. The FBI continues to analyze DNA evidence through genetic genealogy. Investigators continue to review surveillance material from the period leading up to the abduction. The Sheriff's Department has stated the case is active and that multiple investigative threads remain open. The family's $1 million reward remains unclaimed. The FBI's separate $100,000 reward remains unclaimed. Anyone with actionable information is asked to contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Department non-emergency line at 520-351-4900. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She requires daily medication. She has 3 children and grandchildren who have spent more than 2 months not knowing whether she is alive. Her daughter returned to national television, sat in front of a camera, and did her job because that is what her mother would want. And because going on means holding open the possibility that there is still something to go on for. Whatever the truth of this case turns out to be, wherever the evidence leads, whoever the man in that footage is revealed to be, Nancy Guthrie deserves for the answer to come. Her family deserves it. And the community she has lived in for 50 years deserves to know that the person who walked through it with that kind of confidence, that kind of certainty, did not get away. If this case has stayed with you the way it has stayed with me, good. That discomfort is the right response to a situation that has no comfortable resolution yet. Cases go cold when attention moves on. This one does not deserve that. Share this video if you think someone you know might have a piece of this. Leave your analysis in the comments. Not speculation, but the kind of careful observation that sometimes sees what investigators miss. Subscribe if you want to be here when something breaks, because in a case with this much pressure and this much evidence still in motion, something will. When it does, I will be back.